All right, just when it finally looked like the PGA Tour and LIV Golf were set to come together, suddenly we've got this interview from Rory where he chimes in saying that the two tours are no closer than they've ever been to getting together. And what's more, he took it one step further and seemed to put the blame on LIV. We're going to get into those quotes in just a second, but then even further than that, we've got some quotes from Jay Monahan, which looks like he's even now backpedaling, leaving us wondering really where are we at, and are we back to pointing fingers at each other? And speaking of pointing fingers, we've also got a quote from Brandel Chambly that seemed to just stoke the fires to a whole new level here. And he said something in there that I cannot say, Mike, that I agree with. I mean, even going as far as to say that the guys who left for LIV really never kind of mattered on the PGA Tour. And I just don't know if that is really productive in any way. I want to get into it. I want to get you guys' take on this. There's a lot here because now we are definitely left wondering where we really thought we were close. Are we any closer to a deal? We've got a lot of quotes to read. Guys, before we do that, of course, we want to thank this week's sponsor, Titleist. And if you haven't hit the Titleist GT, you have not hit the best driver of 2025. The GT drivers represent the biggest technological leap ever in Titleist driver design, and they're available right now at a Titleist fitting location near you. We got the opportunity to go out to TPI and get fit for ourselves, and I think that's really where the magic is. Now you've got 4 different heads that are each going to do different benefits for different golfers depending on how you hit the ball and how you approach the game. So getting in the hands of a good fitter is really what makes the difference, and you want to go out there and try hitting all 4 heads. They all have a remarkable amount of gains. What we saw was a much tighter, more consistent spin window, which led to better dispersions, more distance, more ball speed. It's really something that, like I said, if you haven't hit it yet, you haven't tried the best driver of 2025. So experience a new class of drivers with the Titleist GT, and you can learn more about each model and find a fitting near you by going to Titleist.com. So, Mike, it's kind of like all eyes are kind of back on the tour's top stars after it feel like it was a little bit of a hiatus where we had a few weeks without signature events. Yep. But now we're right back at it. Arnold Palmer Invitational. We've got Jay there.
Everyone's there.
They're all there.
Stacked.
Right. And what's going to happen? The media is going to hit them, because this is one thing that we've said here on the podcast week in and week out, that our biggest complaint was no matter which side of this you're on, whether you want them to stay separate and you're a LIV guy or a PGA Tour guy, or if you want them to come together, I think one thing we've all been commonly frustrated with, and we've said this so much, is the lack of communication. Yeah. You seem to get these messages that indicate one thing, and then we go back the other way. And specifically, speaking to that initial message, going back just about a week ago, February 20th, we had the PGA Tour releasing a statement that talked about the reunification of the game. And it really seemed to indicate to everybody, be like, okay, it's happening. We're clearing the way. It's finally going to happen. Everybody who's involved needs to be involved, whatever it may be. But then it went dark again for a little while. And just like where we, honestly, you and I, like, we've been watching the news, and every morning I first thing I do is I open up my news app and I'm thinking I'm going to see deal done. Yeah, something like that. And it just has not happened.
Yeah, no. And I'm shocked, like you said, because even over the past week, there's just been so many signs. There's been so many different parties coming together. You got Brooks showing up to TGL.
Yes.
There's like so many things that are like, all right, this is finally going to happen. They're figuring out a pathway to get them back. Fred Couples saying Brooks wants to come back to PGA. So much is coming out about it. You got to assume it's going to happen. And then this week happens, and I feel like everything fell apart.
Right. It seemed friendly. It seemed like it was moving forward. So let's get into what some of the stuff that Rory said. I want you guys are awesome about this. Always like weigh in the comments. Let us know, because like there's a certain degree, like we have to decipher this. You could take these meetings in a couple different ways. So drop in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking, what Rory meant by some of this. So first thing, of course, and Rory, whether he's wanted to or not, sometimes he has been kind of I want to call it the face of the PGA Tour on that side for the negotiation. He's kind of taken that reins by him, on his own at some point. Then he backed away from it. Sacrificial lamb, we get all that. But no matter what, Rory being a big figurehead on the tour side, he's going to be asked. So reporters are pressing him based on that statement that came out from the PGA Tour. Where are we at? what are we seeing? Like, where are we at in this deal? And what he said was, I don't think it's ever felt that close, but it doesn't feel like it's any closer. Two things to that. First of all, he's saying he doesn't feel like it was ever that close. Like that. Well, you got a different impression than the rest of us. So either you're hearing something different,
right? Exactly.
or we're missing something. But he's saying not only does it makes me feel like, has something not just changed in the last week? Has it always been this way? And they're just giving us information that's misleading?
Yeah, it could be.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to think.
But him saying, I don't ever think it's been felt that close, and it doesn't feel like it's any closer. So he continued to say this. This is where I think you're getting a little finger pointing, right?
Okay.
And I think it's getting a little more contentious in this statement. He says, look, I think it takes two to tango. So if one party is willing and ready and the other isn't, it sort of makes it tough.
Yeah, finger pointed LIV right there.
That to me is that.
100%.
Because to me, it's saying like, hey, we released this statement. Jay said we're all for the reunification. Yep. All the best golfers in the world playing together again, but the deal's not done, so it's your fault.
So there's something holding up LIV from agreeing to something. That's what it sounds like, because anytime you throw out that it takes two to tango, you're instantly telling you that I'm playing, it's the other side.
Yeah.
So what could it be? Right.
And that just to me is like, are they now trying to like go back to like a little bit more strong arm tactics? Like what? But it just, I think the picture that we have a lot more quotes to get into here. The picture that kind of keeps going forward is now both sides. Because I've got a quote from Bryson too. Both sides seemingly indicating, well, we don't need you. Mm-hmm. And we've said this over and over here on the podcast, where the longer that this deal drew out, like from the very beginning, you could argue that a deal would have been beneficial to both of them to stop the bleeding. They were each taking something away from the other, and they needed each other. You know, you could say LIV needed the PGA Tour for certain degrees of, maybe you could say validation, you could say eyeballs in broadcast deals, you could say sponsorships, you could say, are they the pathway to official world golf rankings, getting into majors? But then we slowly started to see those chip away on the LIV side. Yep. We saw them getting better broadcast deals. We saw them getting pathways to majors recently, less and less needing it. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, the PGA Tour, you could say they need to stop the bleeding of all their players leaving. Their best players are heading out. But then in the past, off season ish, we saw rumors that flew around that there were going to be a lot more big waves of big names going, and then it didn't happen, and they didn't go. Now they're still grabbing some prospects and stuff like that, but that's not happening. So it's like, again, less each one has to stop the bleeding. So this is where Rory continuing with this, and this is where he kind of gets into indicating that maybe we don't need a deal. So he says, but I don't think the PGA Tour needs a deal. I think the momentum is pretty strong. As you say, TV's been good. TGL's been hopefully pretty additive to the overall situation. I think it would still be the ideal scenario for golf as a whole, but from a pure PGA Tour perspective, I don't think it necessarily needs it. So he puts a little plug in for his TGL there. Yep. And in a lot of ways, rightfully so. You and I enjoy TGL. We've been watching the TGL, and we've seen them post pretty good ratings on television for an inaugural season. So he's clearly saying, like, maybe we don't need to come together.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like he's in a way saying, like, I have everything I need. I play in these amazing signature events. The purses are huge. I'm doing what I do. TGL is hopefully taking off. We don't need a deal.
Yeah.
But he's speaking for himself, I feel like. I feel like there's other people involved who are getting still hurt by this, or maybe not. Maybe some of these rookies, I keep thinking, come back to these guys who are trying to make it to tours.
Yeah.
Like, is there still a pathway? We go back to the conversation you and I had about saying, let's just make the schedule all signature events. I think that's really what the audience wants. The question is, like, what are we hurting by them just being separate and going on their own?
Yeah.
Is it truly is the fan experience really hurting? Are ratings truly that down?
Well, I would say the first thing that comes to mind for me is who's getting hurt is the fans like us.
But how? Like, we still have great majors. This week's event looks great.
They both are doing a great job of, and this is, I think, what Rory and the quote we're going to read from Bryson in a second. I think they're both doing a really good job of creating independent entertainment.
Okay,
They
yep,
both are
sure.
entertaining on their own. However, where I think fans, and you guys can agree or disagree with me in the comments whether you feel the same way as I do, but I think where a lot of people are aware fans are being still left short is the fact that we only see all these best players play together 4 times per year. And we've said this on previous episodes, where we would love to see is even if the two, and we broke it down in a recent episode where we said the 3 basic ways that this could go.
Right.
And I thought, one way would be still operating as independent tours, but have more events that are co-sanctioned where the two come together, where we get to see maybe instead of 4 majors, we get to see 4 majors plus 6, 8 additional events. Fly them under a different, banner name, whatever you want to call them. Remember, we have the WGC events. Call them whatever you want.
Right.
And those are co-sanctioned between the PGA Tour and LIV, and where we see these guys come together and they all play. Now,
So what's so hard about that?
what's so hard about that is exactly
that seems
my
like an
problem.
easy handshake.
Right. Because, yes, independently, you get great tour events with still very stacked fields.
Yeah.
LIV on the other side has the product that they've created where it's new dynamics, team events. They've got, a number of really great players over there as well. So, yes, they could operate separately. But it just doesn't sound like there's a pressure to no longer make it one single tour. But that doesn't mean that there still should not be some incentive to put some sort of closure to the divide and come up with some sort of agreement that maybe doesn't mean that either tour has to wipe itself out.
Yeah.
Because I wonder if part of the hang up, we said this before, with even the wording that the PGA Tour was using of this reunification playing under one flag, under one league, it felt like they were indicating that they wanted absorption. They wanted to reabsorb LIV, and I think LIV is saying like, we don't want that.
No, you're
right? So is there a way that we can have it where there's 2 different leagues? They come to the table, they work together so that the schedules aren't as contentious. They're not butting heads. Maybe there's a little bit more of a mutual design of the schedules so that we can have a bunch of co-sanctioned events, whatever it may be. Here's, Bryson on the other side. So they're in Hong Kong for the LIV event. You had, like I said, this is Rory speaking at the API. So of course that news travels quickly around the world.
Sure.
So it's like, let's get Bryson's take. And what Bryson said is, I continue to see LIV golf growing. It's going to grow at an exponential rate for years to come, and we aren't going anywhere. So that's kind of his response to basically saying, like, we don't need you either. Right?
Yeah, I think they're all content. I think most players are happy where they are, and they don't need each other. I think it's the top who's looking at the product saying, how do we put the Band-Aid on?
Yes, it's the top and it's the other side.
Right?
It's the fans who are left
correct.
discontented. All the players seem like they've settled, and we talked about this too. They're happily where they are. We don't see a lot of now shift between tours going on anymore.
Yep.
Seems like the guys who want to go to LIV are at LIV, the guys who want to stay at tour are at tour. They're all making more money, but we're just not getting to see them play together as often. And the concern that we've said of the sustainability and the growth of the overall game is losing the casual fan who wants to tune in for the events where everybody plays. Are they going to get down to just seeing 4 events per year in the majors? And that's not what we want. We want more growth and sustainable, coverage of golf, kind of over time. So that's what worries me. But like, it definitely, the language seemed like from both sides is like, we're not going anywhere. We don't need to be absorbed. Like, this is where we're at.
I want to be the fly on the wall and just wonder what it is that LIV wants that PGA Tour doesn't like. You know what I mean? According to Rory.
Well, I think, who knows? We can only speculate how hard-nosed they're playing, but they may be what they don't want. LIV may be like, we don't want to come back to the PGA Tour.
Right.
We don't want to be like, what if the negotiation table is the PGA Tour is kind of saying like, well, part of this you guys have to come back and play our events. That's where I keep saying like, if I was sitting at the negotiation table, I'd be like, listen, why don't we iron out a deal where you guys each stay in your lanes, but we create this additional, whether you want to call it a tour or a series of events where you guys play together under another name, whatever it may be. But
could be.
One more thing I want to mention this before we get into this I don't know, Brandel. Chambly. Yeah, Brandel Chambly just coming like from the top deck.
Always.
But one more person that's important to weigh in here, Jay Monahan. Now, Jay, he meters and chooses his words very wisely. So there's a little bit of to it where you have to be like, he's got a little bit of like playing politics a little bit and trying to smooth things out. But at the same time, if you really read into it, the tone of what he's saying to me is definitely seems like he's backpedaling a little bit from the very promising tone coming out of, the announcement on February 20th, where it's like reunifying. So what he said was, this is when Jay was asked also at the API, he said, I don't think anything that the three of us, Monahan, Donald, and Yasser, have said is consistent with what should be said when you're in the middle of a complex discussion to try and unify the game of golf. It doesn't speak to my confidence level. It speaks to the goal. I view that meeting as a huge step, and so I look at it very positively. So he's talking about the meeting that went on, with all of them, and that's where afterwards the announcement was made. I understand I kind of butchered reading that quote, but
we got the gist of it.
Regardless, you got the gist of it. I think the most important line out of all that is him saying, it doesn't speak to my confidence. Like I said, he's a man who's going to choose his words wisely, meter his words. But to me, that's just a way of saying I'm not super confident.
Yeah.
It's my goal. He said that. It's our goal to come together. But to me, you guys tell me in the comments if you think you see that or read that differently. I hear that as saying I am not confident.
Yeah, that's
which
what it
is
sounds
to me is the opposite of what we heard kind of the other day in his tone and in his words.
Yeah.
That they're confident in reunification.
I almost give up at this point.
Right. So now with that said, we're going to talk about what Chambly said, because maybe he's now seeing the writing on the wall of saying, like, we're back to choosing teams, choosing sides, because what he said really fanned the flame. So let's do a pause there. Let's do a quick word from our sponsor, and then I want to read his quote and react to that.
All right, you may not know this, but Justin Thomas has chosen modern classic golf shoes for his entire junior, college, and professional career. Well, he has recently transitioned to a new shoe, the Hyperflex from FootJoy, which is easily my new favorite golf shoe. A golf shoe with style, flexibility, and stability, which is so important in the game of golf. I just opened up the pair the other day. I played 36 holes. So did you.
Yeah.
Out at Greyhawk last week. Talk about comfort. They got that Stratofoam cushion, which you can be on these things all day. I mean, I could sleep in these shoes. They're so comfortable, and that's important to me. But there was no issues. I mean, we got to play so much golf. I mean, the one thing I love about this shoe is not only all the great stability, it's the comfort, but it's the colors. You had these red pop colors on them. They just stand out there. Talk about style. I know we love style when it comes to golf apparel, especially the shoes.
Yeah.
So you got to check out the Hyperflex because these colors are cool and it has all the bells and whistles.
It's style and it's performance. If you think about it, we know these tour players, it takes a lot for them to make a change.
Yeah.
And, for a lot of reasons, you have JT was wearing one type of shoe, and not to say he won't continue to wear it, but for him to be in something different with performance being so key for them, it just shows you the performance of it.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta try it. You gotta experience these shoes. Check out the whole lineup. Go to footjoy.com. Get dialed in. They got that True Fit system, and go play more comfortable, stylish golf.
All right, so getting him back at it here, Chambly, this is where this started. He's talking on Golf Central, and he's basically weighing in on this idea, which what we've been saying here is kind of the writing is on the wall. We're seeing more and more guys kind of indicating on both sides, well, we don't need you, we don't need you. And so he was kind of carrying that conversation of saying well, maybe these two tours don't need each other, right? He then took that conversation then to Twitter, to X, and here's where it started to go a little bit, as far as I'm concerned, off the rails, right?
Yeah,
so I'm going to read the tweet and then we'll kind of react to why I think it's a little bit not necessarily pushing the conversation in the right direction. So he said, and why in the hell does the tour need to bring LIV players back? Sure, I miss a few of them, but it's not like any of them were Steve Jobs to Apple. None of them move the needle, and collectively, they can't scratch out interest in the golf world. Meanwhile, the tour is killing it.
I don't know.
Oh, we know what side you're on.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, okay, fine. You know what? Everyone, like I said, I think there's a room. We said it here in the show. We think there's a room for everyone's opinions. I don't care. You can hate LIV. You can hate the PGA Tour, but there's certain arguments that I think that are just not based in reality.
Yep.
And I think this was one of them.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right? When he said specifically that none of them moved the needle, may I just for a second, Brandel, remind you of a few different people whom you may have forgotten about. First and foremost being Jon Rahm.
Yeah.
Are you going to tell me that Jon Rahm, before he made the big jump that shocked the world over to LIV in December of 2023, when he was on top of his game in the conversation every week, dominating in a lot of ways on the PGA Tour, are you going to tell me he didn't move the needle for the PGA Tour? Likewise, even a guy like Cameron Smith, who went to LIV right after another shocking move, went to LIV right after he won the 150th Open Championship,
the Players Championship,
the Players as well. Remember he had to have his Players parking spot removed. Tell me that he's not missed a little bit at the Players as it comes around here.
Absolutely.
That to me is another one, but even more so. Tell me,
the king of the crop,
to move the needle. Bryson DeChambeau, who you could make a very specific argument that he is the needle, at least for a very specific and important demographic, and that being YouTube golf consumers, who we know is a vastly, dramatically growing demographic of younger viewers who no doubt the PGA Tour has their sights on because we've got the Creator Classic going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Why would they bring that out? Yeah.
Right. No doubt about it. So to say that any of one of these guys never moved the needle, we never needed them, I think it's a counterproductive argument. I think there's really no point. And it's to the point where it almost makes you back off from even listening to him when he says that, because I think there's a lot of very strong points he could have made on the current state of the PGA Tour and saying that, the tour is killing it. Like he finished with that saying, you can make the argument about how electric the tour has been with breakthrough wins from young guys. I mean, Knapp is one of my favorite guys to watch right now, right? These guys. On top of that, it's Scotty Scheffler continuing to be somebody who week in and week out is incredible because he's always in the mix. Even Rory's performance, it just goes on and on. Xander Schauffele healthy, getting back at it. There's a lot of really great points you could have made about the PGA Tour without going the other way.
Yeah. It sounds like the tour is doing well.
Yes.
For those reasons.
But to me, he invalidates his point.
Of course.
By going the other way and saying that we never needed any of you guys.
Yeah.
That's to me, it sounds like a bad breakup.
It does.
You'd be like, I love this chick forever, but I never needed her. No.
Brandel.
Stop.
They need him to create news sometimes.
Well, that's just it. I think to a certain extent, we have to separate and understand and almost in a way give him a grain of salt of saying this is his job. His job is to create eyeballs, is to create debate, is to get people to tune into Golf Central to see what he's going to say next. So in a lot of ways, he's smart in his way of saying, if I stoke the fire, that's my business. That's my job to do so. But for us as fans, a lot of ways where we want to see this move possibly closer to some sort of agreement. And like I said, that agreement doesn't necessarily need to be that whichever your favorite tour is goes away. Maybe there's a way that we can all kind of put this behind us in some sort of, commonplace while at the same time operating separately while at the same time sometimes together. I don't know, but this to me is counterproductive.
I mean, do you really want an 8-week WGC type tour? Would that make you as a fan?
To me, I 100% want it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be 8 straight weeks. Right?
So sprinkle it.
Why can't we have, and I've said this before, but why can't we have 2 tours and then on the off weeks, there's an event sprinkled 8 events, 6 to 8 events sprinkled throughout the entire year where the 2 tours come back together. And you could have, also those, what is it called? Where you have the another event going on at the same time, like when we have the
alternative,
an alternative event. Right? So you could still continue that. So the tour doesn't necessarily have to have less events. You could have the Bermuda going on right now.
Classic.
Right? And then also have this other event where, honestly, for some of those, other events, there's not a lot of the top names are not playing in them anyway. It's the guys who are fighting for their tour cards and stuff like that. The top names, Rory and Scheffler and whatever, can play in this other event against Bryson and Rahm and Cam Smith and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I think of all the tours, PGA, LIV, and then you got the majors. I'm sorry, all the events. that new style of events would probably fetch the most sponsorship dollars,
Yes.
the most eyeballs,
Biggest purses.
So you could get rid of the poor John Deere. We always rip on John Deere. The John Deere Classic. We can get rid of that. We can get rid of all those small events. The tour isn't going to miss out on that much money because they'll make it up tenfold with these new.
Sure.
I'm sure they know all this. But
I would say, though, I make the argument that as much as I love that, there's still a place for the smaller events because, like I said, I like watching the Cinderella stories of the guys who are still trying to.
Of course, the
I don't want to
Highsmiths
shrink
of
the
the world.
tour
Yeah.
too much. Secondly, I think that one problem that the tour has had is as the purses get bigger and bigger, they price out a lot of legacy sponsors who I think do very good things for the tour.
Mm-hmm.
I think an example of that is John Deere. I think that being able to have some of these alternate events or whatever I wouldn't call John Deere necessarily an alternate event, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Where they can have a lower
Non-signatures,
price
yeah.
point, where they can still get in and be a title sponsor. I think that that's important because I think it does a lot of things for local, like the local region and whatever it may be. So that's where I think this to me is not a subtraction. It's an addition. Is there a way we can add? And I understand these guys' schedules are pretty packed, but I don't think it's too packed that you couldn't have a world where, as I said in 2 or 3 episodes ago, Scheffler, Rory, PGA Tour guys play in 12 signature events per year on the PGA Tour and maybe sprinkle in 1 or 2 others based on their sponsors. Like now Tiger will always play in the Genesis, more or less, right? And then on the other side, LIV having their 12-ish events. That's 12 weeks plus the 4 majors. You know, you're up to, what are you up to? 18 weeks, 16 weeks.
Yep.
Then on top of that, you add in 6 to 8 more events. It's still, in a course of a year, it's not too much.
not too much.
And that's where those guys come together. But I'm not at the negotiation table.
You should be.
So I can't help you.
Bring
there.
Frank to the table. Let's go. Let's get it done.
Yeah. Either way, let's get some sort of, because all I can say is this keeps feeling like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So we'll continue to see. We've got the Players coming up where you're going to hear these guys hammered again with questions, especially the Players being the PGA Tour's signature main kind of event. It's going to be that why are certain names not here and where are we going? So we're going to stay right on top of this. We'll continue to watch it. We'll continue to report it back to you guys here. So subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.